Welcome back! So obviously I gave myself a bit of a head start again because liquid latex takes a while to dry, so forgive me. But yeah. As always, I will leave the details of stuff that I'm using down below in the description box if you want to check it out. And without further ado, let's get spooky. Side note, what I'm about to say in this story is actually like a, what do you want to call it? Just a stupid thing that I'm scared of for no reason, but I'm really afraid something like this will happen someday to somebody. So, enjoy one of my stupid irrational fears. Irrational fear! That was it. That was the word that I was looking for. Hi. I used to study English. Believe it or not. Let's get spooky. Brian was not the kind of guy that dates the high school cheerleader. You know? He was just a normal, nerdy, goofy kid. But he started tutoring one of the cheerleaders, and I don't know. Things just kind of clicked. They weren't really, like, for sure dating, but they hung out a lot and held hands and they kissed a few times, so, you know, in his head they were totally a couple, but he wasn't entirely sure if they were or not, because when they'd get around her friends, she would totally ignore him. So I figured, you know, maybe if he tried to make friends with her friends, fit in with the jocks, you know? Even though he is, you know, a nerd and a mathlete, he obviously wasn't going to be joining any sport teams or anything like that, but he could figure out what kind of stuff they were into and, you know, try and find something that interested him. And of course he found some common ground with video games. We started hanging out with the cool kids, you know, and he thought, okay, you know, she's gonna totally be like, we're dating now, you know, like she's gonna call me her boyfriend, that's gonna happen. But it still hadn't happened yet. And then October came around, and of course, you know, homecoming dance and all of that became top priority for their little group. And he was going to ask her to homecoming, but then he found out someone else had already asked her. And she hadn't given him an answer, but when he asked her, she didn't really give him an answer either. So now he had some competition. He had something to prove, you know? So every year, their community had this big warehouse that didn't really get used a whole lot, but every Halloween, they would transform it into this huge haunted house. Well, haunted houses weren't really his thing, but it was the group's thing. So he had to kind of get involved somehow. And he figured he may not actually go in there, but he could volunteer to work as a cashier, you know. He could take money if anyone, you know, needed emergency help. He could go in with a flashlight and pull them out, that kind of thing. And that idea seemed to work pretty well. So they started setting up like the different segments and all of that, and he helped with the setup and painting some of the stuff and, you know, finding props and all of that. And it kind of turned out to be a lot of fun. He kind of enjoyed it. And of course, he enjoyed spending a little bit more time with the cheerleader. So of course, you know, helping set it up, getting to know everyone that was involved, seeing them out of costumes. Once they kind of got into rehearsing what each room is going to do and all of that, he really wasn't quite as scared as he thought he was going to be. Kind of made some more friends with some of the other, you know, actors and all of that. So he was actually kind of getting excited to, like, opening it up and hearing everyone screaming and laughing and all of that. Well, the cheerleader was one of the actors in there, and she predominantly acted like she was a victim for one of the killers in one of the booths. So her job was to cover herself in fake blood and just scream her head off, basically. And she was really good at it. Like, people would come out of that maze like, oh my gosh, that poor girl. Really just freaked out by, like, how graphic it seemed to be, because she was really covered in blood. One of the guys that had been working with them fell down some stairs at his normal job and broke his leg. So they ended up having to find a replacement. And the person that they found, he really didn't say much. He didn't really talk to everyone very much. But he showed up and freaked everyone out. So nobody really asked too many questions, you know? Well, one night after they closed up, the cheerleader came up to Brian and said, "Hey, will you walk me to my car?" And he's like, you know, sure, whatever. And she said, you know, there's just something about this new guy that I don't know. I can't put a finger on it, but something's not right with him. Something just feels very wrong, and I can't figure out what it is. He seems perfectly nice. Something about him kind of leaves me feeling a little unsettled, you know? Brian told her it's probably nothing, you know, but after that he started paying a little bit more attention. And he noticed, you know, the guy did have some, like, odd behaviors. Like, he never hung out afterwards with everyone. You know, everyone would show up early before they opened up every day to kind of get their sets, you know, set up and ready for everyone to come in. And he didn't really do that. Like, he would just show up and be in his full costume. Didn't change there. Always came in his costume and kind of just relied on everyone else to set up for him. Which at first no one really thought anything of, because he was new. He didn't know the original setup and all of that. Like, they just kind of jumped in and helped out, you know? But then after a while, they thought, well, you know, he should know the setup by now, but he wasn't helping, and they figured, well, maybe it's just because we keep doing it, so he just thinks that, you know, we're doing it, so why should he jump in and do something? He started catching him staring at the cheerleader. That really got him seeing why she would be a little creeped out by him. Like, it was odd. Like, he would come in, he had these, like, weird contacts that he always wore. And then He would just stare at her when they were setting up and before everyone arrived, and then after everyone left, when everyone was saying goodbye, he would just stare after her. And it was definitely a weird vibe. So Brian would start staying after her, and then, you know, he'd always make sure that he arrived with her. Just wouldn't let her be alone when they were setting up and stuff. And of course, he was secretly hoping that this meant he was definitely a shoo-in to be her homecoming date, right? I mean, hello. He's being her, like, knight in shining whatever. But, of course, one night, one of the jock guys had to show up. The one, you know, that she'd been spending some time with. So, a little jealous, but he still did what he'd been doing and tried to keep an eye on the guy, because he's a little creepy. And, of course, the jock dude, with all of his big, strong muscles, jumped right in. Kind of told the guy off. Like, stop staring at my girl, you know. Macho man stuff. And, of course, you know, Brian would never have gotten away with that because the dude was like a foot taller than him and, you know, way more muscular. And, you know, athletes don't start fights. So, a little jealous that here he had been taking her to the car and trying to watch out for her, and then this guy just swoops in one night, acts like big macho buff guy, and gets all the credit. Rude. So he was feeling a little sorry for himself, you know, just not having the best night. And then to make matters worse, one of the kids puked in the maze and he had to clean it up. Well, of course, that night, everyone's going through and, oh my gosh, did you see that poor girl? It was so realistic. There was so much blood. And normally, he'd feel like a weird sense of pride about that, you know? Like, yeah, you know, they're doing great. She's really convincing these people, you know? Like, it, I don't know, he felt weirdly proud of how well she was, you know, acting in the thing. So, that night, he was kind of just over it. He's like, okay, yeah, ooh, so much blood, you know? Like, he just he was being a bitter Betty, basically. He was being a bitter Betty about it. And then he heard that the jock guy was kind of hanging around. So he was feeling a little even more bitter. You know, like, okay, guy comes in, tells off the creepy dude, and he's just not having it, you know? He's just not having it. So, they finish up for the day. He kind of sticks around a little bit to see if she's gonna have him walk her to her car. Even though he was being bitter Betty, he wasn't gonna leave her out there on her own, especially with the weirdo. Well, he waited, and he waited, and he waited, and she never showed up. And he was like, okay. So he started asking around, and the jock guy had already left, so he thought, okay, well, Mr., you know, big, fine, fancy hero must have took her home. Great. He gave up and just went home. So when he got home, he, you know, texted her and nothing. So I figured, okay, great. You know, she and the big jock guy are probably out making out somewhere. Like, that's what I wanted to do, you know? Like, he's, you know, just feeling very angry and bitter still. Well, the next day, he shows up there and, you know, tried calling her several times, texted her a few more times, and nothing. So he figured, okay, I guess, you know, she made her choice, you know, like he wasn't happy about it, but what could he do? But he noticed her car was there, but he, you know, walked around and he didn't see her. So he went to their booth, and there was fake blood everywhere. And he's like, wow, you know, like, this looks a little more gory than I remember it. And then he noticed this sort of coppery smell. And he thought, well, that's odd. What does that smell? And he walked around this, you know, big table that they had in there, and he found the cheerleader. She had been hacked to pieces. Just almost unrecognizable. Willie screamed, and people came running, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The cops were notified. They came out, and they couldn't find the murder weapon. And they couldn't find the replacement guy. He hadn't shown up yet. So they called the people that were running the place and were like, hey, you know, what's that guy's name? Because he didn't really talk to any of us. And they said, what guy? Or like, the guy that replaced, you know, Steve when he broke his leg. Like, what was that guy's name? Well, that was the first they'd heard about it. So the place got shut down. They brought in every kind of forensics person they could find, trying to find some kind of DNA from the guy, something. But he always came fully dressed, wore a wig, and had gloves on. So they never found any scrap of DNA, not one scrap of DNA. And they never found the guy. Anyone feel like going to a haunted house? And in a rare occurrence, I finished the story before I finished the makeup. That's rare. It's rare. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, if you couldn't tell. I have a crazy irrational fear about someone acting like they're killing someone in a haunted house, but like they're actually murdering someone. You know what I mean? It could happen. It could happen. People are sick. I'm just saying. People are sick. Kind of like this look is sick, but like not, you know, different kind of sick. Cool sick, right? Alright, love you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this little spooky ook, and we got a few more coming. Enjoy. Bye.